Hey guys, I'm sure you've bought real estate before, but have you ever wondered what some of those terms actually mean? I know a lot of people that we're starting to work with have no idea what they mean because they're brand new buyers, they're first-time home buyers, and sometimes first-time sellers. Maybe they've only just bought the first property and now they're ready to sell it, and they're looking at it going, I don't remember how we got this house, but at the same time, I don't know what those terms mean. So I'm going to share a couple terms with you. I'm Scott with the Davidson Realty team, and I just want to go over a couple quick terms. I don't think I'm gonna pick the obvious ones for the most part. There'll be one or two you might be like, well, I know what that is, but that's okay. I just want you to kind of understand what all those terms are so you can definitely make the right decision for your family. So the first one I'm gonna mention is appraisal. Obviously, we know it's how much is my house worth, right? But do you know why we have appraisals? So appraisals are typically to make sure that the bank, well, think about this. Who's your buyer? Is it the guy on the, is it the guy buying your house? Or is it actually the guy that, or is it actually the bank? So think about this. The buyer comes in and buys your house, but he's asking for a loan. So who's actually putting the money up? The bank is. So an appraisal is the bank's way of making sure their collateral is worth what they're putting the loan out for. So let's just say the house is $200,000, but the house is only worth $180,000. Well, they want to make sure they don't over loan on the house, right? So that's why an appraisal happens. Now the next term that's on the contract is also going to be closing costs. So when you negotiate a contract, you're negotiating closing costs too. Now closing costs are going to include anything from attorney's fees to title insurance to prepaids, which is how much you need to have in your escrow accounts. And all of those things, including, there's a million different things it can include. It could include title insurances especially. So think about title insurance. That's when you have a property, let's say you're buying 3 acres in the middle of the country. You buy the house, somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, you can't own this property. This was my property. This is my grandfather's property. He left it to me, and he died 10 years ago, but he left it to me when I was in Montana. And you're like, I don't know. I bought this property 6 months ago. And he goes, well, you have no rights to buy this property because my grandpappy owned it. All right, now what do you do? So that's what title insurance does. It covers you so that you can actually, let's just say it this way. The attorney has run title on your house and seen that there was no discrepancies in it, and just to ensure that down the road, they get you to buy title insurance. So you can imagine how valuable it is if that ever happens, and it does happen. So it doesn't happen often, but it happens. So another one of the terms, earnest money. So think about earnest money. It's called skin in the game, if you will. A buyer says, I want to buy this property. And the seller says, well, how much money are you going to put down? Right? It's like holding the car on the corner. You give them $1,000 and say, I'll be back tomorrow. That's earnest money. So earnest money can be protected though. So you put the money down, and the thing is, you still have something called due diligence period. So due diligence is basically the buyer's right to do all their inspections and anything they want to check out. They can back out for any reason during due diligence. So think about this. You buy a house, it's a 3-bedroom, and you want to turn it into a 5-bedroom. So during this due diligence period is when you get a hold of the architects, contractors, find out how much it's going to cost, all those different kinds of things. It's also the time where you just have a home inspection, where you find out if the electrical is good, the plumbing is good, the HVAC is good. So that's the time when you do all those different things. Then the next thing you're going to run into is after due diligence is up, say that's usually 7 to 14 days. After that's up, then you have to deal with the financing contingency. So the financing contingency basically is usually 21, 28 days, somewhere in there. And basically what that says is that the lender has to show that you're approved. Fact of the matter is, on the contract, it actually says they have to show you can't be approved. So it's a little bit of a play on words. But basically, if a buyer is buying a house and 3 weeks in, they find out, I can't be approved, and they get a letter from the lender that says you can't be approved, then what they'll actually do is they'll actually go ahead and give you your earnest money back. Now, a lot of sellers get really upset about this rule because it doesn't make anybody happy to have their house off the market for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden they get their earnest money back and you're back on the market with nothing to show for it. But it is part of the contract. So anyway, everything on the contract's negotiable, so you can move the timelines up, and I would just be aware of those kinds of things before you ever get into a contract. Down payment is one of those things. Not a whole lot of questions involving down payment. It's just that most of the down payments for conventional used to be 5 to 20% down, and then FHA came out with a program, basically 3.5% down payment. So let's say it's a $200,000 house, 3.5% might be $7,000. That's no big deal. and then they have to cover whatever closing costs weren't covered as well. But you know, that's at 3.5%, so nice and easy. Well, now they've come back out with some more programs that are getting back into 0 down. So you could actually just pay your closing costs or even negotiate that into the contract. But there's a lot of programs out there now with 0% down. So you buy a $200,000 house, no money out of pocket, and get all the closing costs covered in the deal. VA actually does that a lot. When Veterans Administrative has their loans, they'll get the house. Basically, they don't have any cash out of pocket when they buy it. So that's part of your down payment. And the last thing I want to mention to you is pre-qualification versus pre-approval. So this one's a little bit interesting because when you get a pre-qual letter, people are like, well, they're pre-qualified. You'd be surprised. So pre-qualification typically means you've shared with a lender, okay, here's my name, here's my social security, and I make this much money. And the lender says, well, based on that information, it looks like you're fine. And they pull your credit very simply, and you're a 680, you're a 700, you make enough money for whatever you're trying to buy, so they give you what's called a pre-qual. Well, what you really want, if you're a seller especially, and a buyer, is you want a pre-approval. Now, the difference between that is they've already got your tax returns, they've already got your W-2s, they've already taken your verification of employment, verification of income. They've already checked out to see if you have any judgments against you, if you have if you have to pay child support, or if there's any different things, secondary incomes. If you're self-employed especially, this is where it gets really, really big. So if you're self-employed, obviously you might have written everything off. I mean, that's what CPAs tend to do, right? You make $100,000, they write off $98,000 of it. It looks like on paper you made $2,000. The problem is, guess what? According to Uncle Sam, you did make $2,000, and that $2,000 ain't gonna get you much of a house. So you got to remember that, and that's what a pre-approval will tell you, is that how much you're truly qualified for. Now, if you're a seller and you see a pre-approval showed up, usually it's a little bit more security, where you can look at the deal and go, I think I'm going to take my bets on this person being a better qualified candidate to buy my house. So that's the difference between the two of them. So I hope some of these terms help. I know it's a little bit, it's interesting. Some of you might know all of them already, but I'll bet you somebody out there was watching this and saying, you know what, I didn't know what that actually meant or why they do it. So if there's any other questions or anything like that we can answer for you, or obviously if we can help you, buy or sell or invest, we would love to help you do that. My number is down below, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.